Before we get started, I want to remind everyone that the information in this presentation is not to be or construed as investment advice. The information presented are subject to change without notice, and while we have made every reasonable effort to ensure that the content is reliable and accurate, we have not independently verified the content and are not responsible for errors therein. Please consult a professional advisor before putting a loonie in any of these financial markets. Hi everyone, my name is Richard Diaz and welcome back to the IceCap Canadian Market Wrap. In this week's episode, we are going to discuss a topic that cuts to the core of what ails Canada, and that is the nature of our exports and the importance of energy and natural resources. There is a section of Canada's political class that hate it or ignore it, but that doesn't make it wrong or untrue. And the ideological capture, what I call luxury beliefs, that underpin this view must end if Canada is going to escape the economic malaise that we're in and improve the standard of living of working class people. In this week's video, we will present the evidence and let you decide. So let's get after it. All Canadians benefit from the export of energy products, specifically crude oil. This is because of the present structure of our current account balance. For the uninitiated, a current account is, in simple terms, money flowing in versus money flowing out. It includes things like trade in goods and services and financial flows like dividend payments from overseas investments. The importance of a current account lies in its role as an indicator of an economy's structure, competitiveness, and potential vulnerabilities. Any deficit must be financed by foreign capital, and if it's too large or unsustainable, it will get corrected, sometimes painfully. Given that the other bits are roughly in balance, right now, energy exports provide a sustained positive contribution to our current account balance. Without this, it would be deeply negative. This means that Canada, in effect, sells oil to pay for imported goods. And because of our poor productivity growth, high debt levels, and domestic capital flight, without this inflow of money, Canada would either face an internal devaluation, painful fiscal austerity, or an external devaluation, a lower currency, higher inflation, and eventually fiscal austerity. Over the next few slides, I'm going to expand on each of the points I've just made. But first, I want to address some of the things I know will come up. One, yes, of course, Canada exports and imports billions of other products and services. In fact, after energy products, our biggest export is services, excluding travel, as you can see, at about $152 billion per year. We also import a lot of services, and we even import some energy products, mostly from out east. And yes, it's true, natural resources are a fraction of GDP. This is the chart from 2023, but not much has changed over the last 2 years, and this chart's nicer than mine, so here you go. What's more is that there are not that many people working in the oil sector. Only about 220,000 are directly employed there, although clearly there are hundreds of thousands of jobs that are indirectly related to mining oil and gas. But it's not about GDP or employment, it's about the current account or the trade balance. And to be more precise, it's about the net export figures that I'm showing you here. And as you can see, it's clearly dominated by natural resources and, of course, energy products, specifically oil. This is important for the following reasons. Canada is facing a productivity emergency. The 10-year compound annual growth rate of GDP is 1.8%, which under normal circumstance would be okay, respectable even. But as you can see clearly from the chart, it's a fake number. Population growth, mostly through immigration, accounts for 1.6 or 88% of that growth, while productivity growth is only about 0.2. That is a disaster. Besides all the obvious social problems that mass migration engenders, it's completely unsustainable. Productivity growth is the only sustainable way to derive economic growth and to improve the standard of living of working people. To have nearly zero productivity growth over the last 10 years is frankly breathtaking and a severe indictment on Canada's leadership. Another problem that Canada faces is high debt levels. At 313% of GDP, this ranks as one of the highest debt burdens in the world. This is a growing problem in a world of higher long-term interest rates, as we've discussed on this channel before, as a larger share of incomes and tax revenues get siphoned away to pay interest payments on mortgages, loans, and bonds. The share of these bonds is at a record in terms of foreign ownership, which is good in a sense because foreign money has come into Canada. But it's also exposing the problem of Canada's unsustainable fiscal path, as we talked about last week, and it risks a further deterioration in the economic outlook. This exposure to foreign investors means that if there's a crisis at home or abroad, our bond market is highly susceptible to changes in investor sentiment. If Canada does not get its act together, the money can and may leave. Related to the issue of foreign ownership in the Canadian bond market is that of direct investment flows. Canadians, not satisfied with investment prospects at home, are investing elsewhere, primarily in the U.S. This is otherwise known as capital flight. Note this was not always the case. We see that again in portfolio investment, which is shorter term in nature. And again, when using both of these charts, we have to be clear that there is investment into Canada, but it's the net figure that we are concerned about and that we need to pay attention to. This capital flight is important because it is a symptom of a broader problem. Canada is a horrible place to invest capital. Successive governments have raised taxes and increased regulation, and this has put pressure on the natural resource sector, but also in manufacturing, which has shrunk to an all-time low, as I've talked about in episode 55. And another related piece of evidence is the collapse in research and development spending, which is now at a 25-year low relative to GDP, and subject of a future video, but of course relates to productivity, and again is an indictment on the leadership around CAPEX. And again, as we've discussed at length before on this channel, and we will until it changes, all of this has led to a flatlining of private CAPEX, which is critical to improving labor force productivity growth. Because as you can see, yes, government CAPEX is important, and it is rising, but the numbers just don't stack up. Canada needs to encourage the private sector to invest in Canada and build things again. So if Canada needs to encourage all types of investment and private CAPEX, why should we focus on oil and energy more broadly? Because we have tons of it. Canada has the third largest oil reserves in the world, fifth largest gas reserves in the world, and it remains the mother of all strategic opportunity. What's also important to remember is there are knock-on effects to other industries when it comes to cheap energy that's ubiquitous and available across the country. And finally, what people don't understand is this oil will be produced. If we don't, someone else like Russia or Saudi Arabia or Venezuela will. This is because global oil demand is rising and it's here to stay, and only the most politically captured projections say otherwise. Even the IEA, which for years have peddled overly conservative forecasts in an effort to stall investment in this critical energy infrastructure, have finally capitulated, lifting their forecasts for global demand. What Canadians need to realize is just how much money the oil sands pump into government coffers, as well as to the private sector. In 2022, the last data that we have, a record $34 billion in royalties were collected by oil and gas producing provinces in Canada, and the oil and gas industry paid to the federal and provincial governments nearly $12 billion in income taxes. What's more is that in the era of elbows up, finding new markets for our most important export should be a priority. Or at least, I thought it was anyways. Anyway, that means Asia or Europe. Right now, Canada faces the dim prospects of a monopsony. You've heard of a single seller before? That's a monopoly. Well, a monopsony is a single buyer, and they can use their market power to force discounts on the seller. And that's exactly why Western Canadian Select, Canada's oil benchmark, trades at such a deep discount to the US and European markets. We sell nearly all of our oil to the US, and we have but ourselves to blame. History does not repeat, but it does rhyme. 175 years ago, Canada built the Canadian Pacific Railway to counter American encroachment on our sovereignty. In a very real way, it created Canada by giving the West access to markets for products the world wanted without having to pay the US a toll. Fast forward to today, and again, it's goods from Western territories at the mercy of U.S. infrastructure. But this time, it's not goods via railway, but oil and gas via pipeline. And despite the protestations to the contrary, it's actually the East that's extremely vulnerable. Ontario, Quebec, and maritime provinces get virtually all of their oil and gas via pipeline from the U.S. And this means, should it come down to it, the U.S. could cut the East off completely from its vital energy needs. From a security standpoint, this should be completely unacceptable, as it was in 1871. Building a network of pipelines from west to east would address one of Canada's biggest security failings and exploit an obvious opportunity. And like the railway before it, it would boost our economy and help ensure our sovereignty for the next 200 years. Now, admittedly, that would take decades, but our network through the Rockies would not. And to reiterate, it would benefit all Canadians while simultaneously decouple America from the U.S. This means that the people who block the export of this energy are acting against the interest of all Canadians, and I would beg them to get out of the way. All right, that's a wrap on this week's episode. Please like, subscribe, and follow for more. And as always, we manage money for families all across Canada and the world, so please feel free to get in touch.